Thank you for having me. I'm Neha Palmer. I'm the CEO and co-founder of Terawatt Infrastructure. I am here today to tell you that charging is not going to be the bottleneck. There's a lot of talk about all of the infrastructure required to make this EV transition happen. And there is a lot of effort underway to smooth the charging piece of it. And Terawatt is a company that is on a mission to make sure, again, charging is not going to be the bottleneck. We're on a mission to provide the most reliable source of charging for commercial fleets. Again, the focus is on commercial fleets. We know that there's a lot of effort out there on the public side, but for this transition to truly happen, we have to capture that fleet market. And Terawatt is here to provide solutions for that. A little bit about me and kind of why we started Terawatt. For a decade before I started Terawatt, I was at Google leading energy strategy for them as they built out a bunch of data centers across the world. And you might be asking yourself, what do data centers have to do with EVs? And really, what is so important is that it is a very similar stack of infrastructure that you need to build to power servers, that you need to power vehicles. The good news is there's a lot of experience in the world in doing that. So we can take the lessons that we learned from that and apply them to a new use case. I was super excited about this. I've been passionate about figuring ways to reduce emissions. While I was at Google, we got them to 100% renewable. And one big thing that I noticed when we were doing that is that there were a lot of corporations that joined us along the way. Any big energy user over the years suddenly realized that there was a way to meet their needs with clean sources of energy. That corporate will was one of the big factors in actually starting to convert the power systems globally, but especially here in the US. And so I saw some of that will happening in the EV space. I'd say almost all of the Fortune 50 has made commitments around becoming carbon neutral or even net negative. And so I saw the will to start this transition, especially as they started thinking about their supply chains and fleet electrification. So with that in mind, we started Terawatt about 3 years ago. And again, leveraging the lessons that we have from electrifying other industries, data centers, and applying that to what is a pretty complex use case, but something that can absolutely be done. So we've raised $1 billion, but I'll talk about my entire cohort. Some of them are here today. There is a lot of capital that is excited about this space. Money is not the constraint. You pair, I think it's about $5 billion of private capital that has talked about investing into this space, along with all of the great incentives and programs that have come out of the IIJA and the IRA. There is money ready to put to work for this purpose. We are actively developing these sites. Terawatt has 14 sites under development. If I go to my entire cohort of companies that are doing this, there are dozens of sites under development to help fleets start to electrify. On the heavy-duty side, EV trucks emit 63% of, 63% less greenhouse gas than diesel. So as the corporate will to reduce their carbon emissions grows, this will be an important part of the toolkit for them to get there, especially as it relates to their supply chain. So where are we with EV electrification? You hear a lot about, hey, it's start-stop, vehicle prices, vehicle availability. Again, the first thing that we see are these environmental commitments from a growing list of companies. There are people who are starting beyond piloting and starting to convert large amounts of their fleets to EVs. A typical commercial fleet can turn over once every 10 years, and so they have a buying decision they make every single year. Many of them are electing to start to fold EVs into their buying on an annual basis at scale, which is really exciting. There's a lot of federal, state, and other mandates that are also pushing this. A little compliance never hurts anybody, especially as we're trying to kick off a new industry. So we do see things like the Advanced Clean Fleet Rule in California, other warehouse rules that are really pushing companies to start to make this transition faster maybe than they might on their own. But many times it's aligned with what they're already trying to do internally. Government and utility programs. So A lot of the utilities are figuring out ways to help this transition. They realize that we need their product, and so they're putting programs in place, like things to make the interconnect process cheaper and potentially faster, not always faster, but trying to do so. And also government rules that allow us to do things like move faster through permitting processes, because these are very intense installations, especially when it comes to the fleet application. The other tailwind that is starting to emerge is this lower cost of operation for EVs. I want to be transparent. We are there on the light-duty side. We've seen lots of fleets tell us, hey, it's actually not in the shop that often. Might need tires more often, but it's a pretty exciting experience for them when they realize that these are on the road more often than not. Heavy-duty side, we are still early days, but we're seeing that technology transition start to happen and fleets starting to see the benefits of electric vehicles. So the other side of it is headwinds. And again, here to tell you that charging is not going to be the bottleneck. A lot of it is because there are companies like Terawatt out there that are ready to provide solutions to some of these headwinds. It can be complex for fleets to make that transition in their operations from ICE vehicles, which have had a very known operational pattern for the last century at this point, and folding that into their existing operations. So there is a learning curve for fleets. What we do see is a lot of excitement for the technology. If you talk to any driver, especially on the heavy-duty side, who has piloted an EV, they love the driving experience. If any of you drive an EV, you know it is a wonderful experience to drive a vehicle with that much torque. Apply that to a semi-truck, and it's that much better. The upfront capital costs are still high for some of the use cases, especially when it comes to charging. It requires a very large amount of power. It requires a lot of upfront capital for the chargers. Also, a lot of planning with the utility and planning with the landlord if they don't own their site. And it can be complex from an infrastructure perspective. We are still starting to evolve as an industry. The technology is evolving. So trying to catch the right moment and the right technology can be difficult for fleet owners who have been basically running sites and just fueling kind of on a really normal schedule for many years. Oftentimes, these fleets are busting at the seams. I think we all saw the run-up in what was happening with real estate over the last couple of years, especially in warehouse hubs. So they oftentimes don't have the space to do this. And then power, always a consideration when they are installing charging. Their site may have been there for 20 years. They did not put that site there thinking about, does that circuit above have power? Terawatt has the capability and the know-how to solve all of these problems for a customer so they can get a turnkey solution, so they know that when they buy those vehicles, they have that charging solution in place next door to their facility. So charging at scale is complex. I'm a skier, so I like the green, blue, black analogy. But when we're talking about passenger vehicles, 10 of them, not too bad. Don't need too much power. But when you get to the far end, it's incredibly difficult. We're starting to get to the level of data centers for this heavy-duty use case when you have many vehicles with large batteries charging all at once. So again, this is something that Terawatt and companies like ours are well-versed in providing solutions to the market to do this, well ahead of when they will have these vehicles. We already have, again, those 14 sites in construction. Many of our cohort have that as well. This charging is alive and ready to go today. So the solutions we offer are charging infrastructure and charging services. Again, it is a transition. This is technology tied to power, tied to customer operations. And what we really want to do is make sure that the customer can focus on their operations. The fleet will do what it is expert at, running their business. And companies like ours can provide the solution set so they don't even have to think about it. So in closing, again, charging will not be the bottleneck. We are working well in advance of these large-scale fleets coming to fruition. We know that the planning cycle is long, but we are making these investments now. We have a lot of support with some government programs. Terawatt was the recipient of a $64 million grant in the last round of grants submitted for the federal CFI program, for example. So many tailwinds for companies like ours that are here and ready and willing to provide this infrastructure for this transition. Thank you.
Please welcome the Head of Government Affairs for Sila Nanotechnologies Incorporated, Alex Fitzsimmons.
Hello, everyone. So my name is Alex Fitzsimmons with Sila Nanotechnologies. We're a next-generation battery materials company. It's great to be here. I want to talk to you today about one number. Now, lots of numbers matter, but this one is particularly important. And that number is 400. A recent survey found that nearly half of US consumers expect their EVs to get at least 400 miles of range. I'll say that again. Half of American consumers expect their EV to get 400 miles of range or more. Now, some of you might be surprised by this number, given the fact that the average American drives 37 miles per day. I was a little surprised, too, given some of the prevailing narratives out there that we don't actually need to increase range that much, we just need to lower cost. Well, two things can be true at once, and consumers have made their voice loud and clear. They want more range. Now, here's another number. I said I'd only give one, but here's another one. Recent EPA data says that median EV range hit 270 miles for model year 2023. One headline said, quote, "That's plenty for an average weekly commute." Now that might be true technically, but does it really matter? Consumers don't want an EV that just satisfies their weekly commute. They want an EV, at least half of them do, that can get 400 miles of range or more. So what do we do about that? I mean, there are some EVs on the road today that can get 400 miles of range, but they're few and we need to make them more affordable. So my question for you is this: how can the US enable widespread adoption of EVs when nearly half of US consumers expect more range out of their EVs than current technology can support? Well, what's clear is that if we are going to meet our EV adoption goals, the world needs better batteries, and that means higher performance. Now, as we all know, lithium-ion battery costs have declined by about 90% in the last decade, which has driven enormous growth in EV demand. But it's not enough. Right? Because as we know, consumers are demanding that we get more. And after years of success, cost and performance have essentially plateaued as we begin to test the limits of conventional battery technology. So where do we go from here? Right? From my perspective, the only way forward is through. We need innovative new battery chemistries that can increase performance and meet growing consumer demand. Now, I'm a little bit biased, but I think Sila has a key role to play. So, Sila was founded in 2011. We're spun out of a Georgia Tech lab. We're now a 400-person company that's raised almost $1 billion. Sila's goal was to engineer a new anode made of nano composite silicon that increases performance and reduces the need for Chinese graphite. Our product increases energy density by 20% today, and we have a pathway to get to 40%, which, if you're keeping score, that gets a lot of vehicles over 400 miles of range. But energy density isn't just about increasing range. Another tidbit from that consumer survey: it found that the top 3 concerns for US consumers are range, cost, and charge time. Range, cost, and charge time. We all sort of know that intrinsically, right? But what do we do about it? Well, let's take them in turn. Let's start with range and cost. With conventional battery technology, there's an inherent trade-off. If you want to increase range, you add more cells, which increases cost, and vice versa. We have to change that paradigm. And this calls for an overused but highly relevant word: innovation. We need innovative new battery chemistries like Sila's and many others that can break through the current performance limits and meet growing customer demand. And that is what Sila is doing. Now, cost reduction doesn't just happen overnight, it happens with scale, which is why you also need innovative technologies that are scalable drop-in solutions that can work with any form factor, and that's what Sila's created. So as Secretary Granholm said earlier today, last year Sila kicked off construction for our auto-scale manufacturing plant in Moses Lake, Washington, in partnership with DOE. At full capacity, that plant will produce enough anode material to supply up to 1 million EVs per year. Now, we're going to need a lot more Silas out there if we're going to reach our EV goals. Okay, now charge time. With higher energy density, Sila can get from 10% to 80% charge in 20 minutes, and we have a roadmap to get down to 10 minutes. That's the power of energy density. And so again, the opportunity here is enormous, but we have to be focused on the right things, and that's range, cost, and charge time. Now, there's another reason why we need new battery chemistries, and that is well known to this crowd. China controls the battery supply chain. For example, more than 90% of the world's graphite currently flows through China. And this is where we reach the role of government policy. The historic investments from the Bipartisan Infrastructure Law and the Inflation Reduction Act lay the groundwork for a US and allied battery supply chain. No doubt. With those government resources, we should prioritize innovative companies that can scale here in the US and with our allies. We have a lot of work to do in this regard. We cannot afford to squander investments in new battery technologies with the wrong market signals. And I'll give you two very timely examples. First, we need to make sure that under foreign entity of concern rules, that these battery materials that we're talking about are deemed traceable. They are eminently traceable, and they should be subject to FEOC rules. Two, we need to make sure that the direct and indirect material costs for these battery materials are counted under 45X. These are powerful market signals, but only if they are implemented the right way. We cannot expect to get a 400-mile battery and outcompete China with unmet promises and conventional battery technology alone. Conventional battery technology has gotten us far, but there's a long way to go. This is why it's important that we expand beyond legacy battery materials and blaze a new path. Now, we can do it. The road is long and winding, but we will get there. We just have to be focused on the right market signals to build a US and allied supply chain that's focused on the right numbers, the numbers that consumers have already told us they want: range, cost, and charge time. That is how we win the race for a better battery. Thank you.
Please welcome the Manager of Long Range Planning and Strategy for Kia Motors America, Stephen Kosowski.
Good afternoon. Thanks for the opportunity. So I'll start first with a little bit about Kia. We'll talk about who we are, how long we've been here, and then get into some of the clean tech investment that we're really proud of. We are the number 6 brand in the United States in terms of sales. In 2023, we sold about 782,000 vehicles. We sold more than 32,000 EVs. And globally, we sell 3.1 million units around the world. We're part of the Hyundai Motor Group, which is the number 3 automaker around the world. And we've been in the US for 30 years, so we're a relatively young brand. In the US, we sell 11 models. So the showroom has 11 nameplates on it. 3 of those are battery electric EVs. We sell 3 hybrids and 3 plug-in hybrids as well. We also have North American production in West Point, Georgia. We build about 340,000 units a year there. All those 3 SUVs, the Telluride, the Sportage, and the Sereno, come out of West Point, Georgia. We also have an assembly plant in Monterrey, Mexico that builds the Rio and the Forte, and we build more than 200,000 units a year there. The 3 award-winning EVs that we're really proud of start with the EV9. That's a 3-row, 304-mile SUV EV. It starts at about $54,900. This vehicle is the North American Utility Vehicle of the Year. This year, we're really proud of that. And it's really aimed at folks who are in Kia Tellurides, Toyota Highlanders, Honda Pilots, Nissan Pathfinders, Explorers. You get the picture. As an all-electric 3-row alternative to those vehicles, it's compelling. The EV6, which was launched in 2022, is our 310-mile mid-market crossover. It kind of splits the difference between a Model 3 and a Model Y, like size-wise and conceptually. And it can be bought for $42,600. It also won the North American Utility Vehicle Award 2 years ago when it was launched. And the third EV is the Nero EV. It goes 253 miles, and it can be bought for $39,600. Now, those 3 vehicles originate from Kia's Plan S, which was announced about 4 years ago in 2020. And it is a $27 billion investment into EVs, electrification, and clean tech. And there's a lot more to come, and I'm going to talk about that. But in the near term, what Plan S has done, aside from yielding those vehicles and some others, is in our report card. And we'll talk about that. And if you look at the graphs that are up there, what it's allowed us to do is sell from less than 1% EVs in 2020 to 6% of our sales as EV in 2023. And electrified volume for Kia has gone from about 10% in 2020 to almost 24% last year, and it's going to go a lot higher. So let's take a look at that. So this graphically portrays what I just described. You can see the green columns characterize the battery electric sales volume for Kia. The yellow line characterizes the share of our sales growth. And then on the right side of the slide are our ambitious targets. We're going to sell more than 1 million battery electric EVs around the world in 2026, and it goes to 1.6 million or more in 2030. So all of this investment, which is about $5 billion a year through 2027, is going to yield all this volume and electrification and decarbonization. So some of the vehicles that are coming from this investment, of course, the EV9. But if you were at the Los Angeles Auto Show in November, we revealed the EV3 concept and the EV4 concept. Now, we get it loud and clear on the cost and the price part of this, and these vehicles will come to market with a much lower price point because they have a much lower cost basis. We're planning to have 7 or 8 EVs by 2027. These are some of them. The EV3 is an entry SUV EV. Think of it as an electric version of the Kia Seltos or Honda HR-V, that kind of size and class. More than 300 miles range, between about $35,000 and $40,000. We think it's going to be compelling also. The EV4 is sort of the sedan complement of that. Think of it as an electric compact sedan. Think of it as an electric Forte, which is very much like a Civic or a Corolla dimensionally, more than 300 miles range, starting in the low 30s, a very bold design statement, and also a very compelling product. There's a couple other vehicles up there. If you were at CES in January, Kia had a huge announcement about its platform beyond vehicle. And effectively what this is Kia's entrance into electrified cargo. We showed two vehicles. This is one of them, the PV5. This vehicle is sort of a compact electric minivan. We're going to build it with seats to carry people for like Uber and Lyft, and then there will be a cargo version to carry cargo and stuff. And we think this vehicle fits with low emission zones, LEZs, where getting goods and people in and out of city centers is going to be really important. There's two other vehicles that are up there under the red drapes. One of them's a pickup truck. That may be a surprise. And there's also another SUV that's in gestation for the latter part of the decade. It's coming about 2027. The other point, the final bullet point up there is discussion about our IONNA DC charging network, which I'm going to talk about a little bit further. The folks in West Point, Georgia, where we build the Telluride and the Sereno and Sportage, they also wanted to send a picture of their readiness for the EV9. We're going to build the EV9 there starting in May. So they were very proud of the work, the brick and mortar, and the $200 million investment to get that plant ready to build the EV9. Some new robots. It's pretty cool. And the first one came off the line last month. It's a pilot vehicle. They're building pilot vehicles now and pre-production vehicles, but in May, this vehicle goes into production in West Point, Georgia, and we're really proud of it. And it's also a byproduct of the Inflation Reduction Act. You know, we wouldn't be shifting production to the United States probably if it wasn't for the IRA, so we're really thankful for that. The other news that's on this slide is the Hyundai Motor Group's brand new battery electric vehicle plant that's being built in Savannah, Georgia. 300,000 units a year. We're going to get some of those, and that goes into production in fourth quarter of this year. So look out for news on that. And it's called the Meta Plant, by the way. State-of-the-art, multi-billion-dollar investment with battery packaging and assembly on site. So look for that. Okay, I want to spend a minute and talk about this. A lot of these topics have come up. I feel like I'm echoing sentiments of lots of others here today. But I just wanted to convey a couple of points about the headwinds against EV. And it echoes what Alex and Neha said, cost, infrastructure, and range. And the price of the vehicle is way high right now. We're working really hard. I just talked about getting the price down into the low 30s. That's coming. We're working on getting the costs of the pack down. That's coming. But in the mind of the customer, they still perceive a really expensive monthly payment. The interest rate currently isn't helpful. The Inflation Reduction Act, while helpful, is a little bit whipsawing folks. You know, some EVs are in, some EVs are out. A year ago we had 15, now we have 12. Let's be aware of that. And then with respect to charging infrastructure, let me go back to range real quick. One is we had the same data on 400 miles being the psychological number for EV intenders. And what's interesting is if you ask EV owners how much range do they need, they come back and they say, yeah, I need about 250 miles of range. So it's interesting what the perception and the reality is there. Now, linking this is infrastructure. And we think that infrastructure is probably one of the most important parts of this. It may be obvious, but the way we see it is if you have visible, prolific, ultra-reliable charging, it allows us to use smaller battery packs, which does what? It lowers the cost, it lowers the price, it allows us to use some of that material to make more EVs. It allows cars to be driven more frequently. Currently, EVs are maybe the second or third car. They don't go on long trips. But ultra-reliable charging can help fix that. We think it's the key. Okay. I mentioned IONNA. If you're familiar with Europe and the venture between these automakers in Europe, which is called IONITY, in the US, the joint venture is very similar. And this is between BMW, Honda, General Motors, Hyundai, Kia, Mercedes-Benz, and Stellantis. And it's a hundreds of millions, multi-billion-dollar effort to build out 30,000 ultra-fast DC chargers across the country by 2030. That's like 5,000 new chargers a year. So we got to step on it. But the aim is to revolutionize EV charging in North America, and that's to make it visible, prolific, ultra-reliable, and a really pleasant experience, something that's arguably not the current case. Okay, one more and I'm done, and it's Kia's perspective and Kia's view is that while EV demand may be nonlinear, a little choppy, and we're feeling that right now, we will be ready with the products, the supply, the production, the compelling technology, and the super useful innovations. And with that, I thank you.